Hello, I'm Felicity Cohen. I'm so excited to introduce you to my Wellness Warriors podcast. For over 20 years, I've been a passionate advocate for helping thousands of Australians find solutions to treating obesity and health-related complications through surgical intervention and holistic managed care. My podcast is dedicated to all the people, past, present, and future, who have helped shape my journey and continue to inspire me to work consistently to achieve a healthier Australia in both adults and future generations. I hope you enjoy it. Today I'd like to welcome to my Wellness Warriors podcast Elaine Harvey. Elaine is a pediatric sleep consultant, originally from Ireland, and I think sleep is such a vital subject for us to talk about when it comes to wellness and well-being, and it's one of the biggest things that I talk to patients about every single day of my life. And I often think that, sleep, stress, sugar, the three S's, they often go hand in hand. And today I'm really excited to talk to you all about what you do to set that foundation for sleeping behaviour patterns and working with people who have issues with their newborns and with children. Let's start first of all, Elaine. Tell us a little bit about you and how did you actually end up working as a paediatric sleep consultant?
Thanks for that introduction. So how I got into it was really, I kind of fell into it, to be honest with you. So I've grown up in a very large family, always had kids around us, and I was always basically the local babysitter. Never actually saw that as a career choice, and I had studied interior design, and I'd always assumed that I would be doing something with people because I'm a bit of a people person. My husband calls me the social butterfly, but in about 2000, my husband and I, we were dating at the time, we moved to London, and I started working as a nanny in London. And that was the first time that I really recognised working with children as a career option for me. And I quickly kind of moved into working as a maternity nurse in the UK. So as a maternity nurse in the UK, what we used to do would be, I would do 24 hours a day, 6 days a week, care of mum and baby for the first 12 weeks of the baby's life. And basically establish a routine, establish feeding, and be there to support mum in that first 12 weeks of life. So it was a wonderful thing for a parent to have. But for me, it was, I would work with one family and have a baby basically sleeping through the night with one feed a night and on a pretty good routine. Then I'd take a week off and then I'd go and work with another family. So for years, I was like, rotating this conveyor belt of new babies. So by the time we moved here in 2006, I was exhausted. I was a 26-year-old that looked like I was 36. I had wrinkles across my face and I was so exhausted from what I'd been doing, and just the relentlessness of new baby. As you can imagine, as any mum can imagine what that first 3 months of having a new baby is like. So I started working in a childcare centre. I actually worked at Kids on 4th at Palm Beach, and they looked at my resume and put me in the nursery room. And I'd never worked in a group setting. I'd always had that lovely one-on-one care. So when I went into this group setting and I had all these different routines, it was really confronting, and I just didn't know how I could manage these different babies, different ages, and different routines and still give really good quality of care to these babies. So I asked all the parents if I could just put their babies on my routine and let me see if I can improve the sleep overall for everybody. So within 2 weeks, I had all of my babies on a beautiful routine. They were all sleeping better. I had all of them sleeping at the same time in the nursery room, and everyone was getting great sleep. And one of the mums had come in and said to me, wow, well, we go to sleep school to do that. Well, first of all, we had mums saying, how did you get these babies to sleep? How did you get them all to sleep? And they'd said that their sleep was improving at home as well. And one of the mums had said to me, well, we go to sleep school to teach babies how to sleep. And I thought that was a really bizarre concept. So this was back in 2007. And there weren't sleep consultants or pediatric sleep consultants here in Australia. I think I was one of the first two in the whole of Australia. But when this lady told me that we go to the hospital to teach our babies how to sleep, I was like, oh no, I'll show you how to do it at home. And that's where Lullababy SOS started. It was that I knew I could teach the babies how to sleep, but I didn't know how to tell the parents. So for the next 2 years, I basically worked within the community with any mums that were happy to have the help to show them how they could support their babies. And over that time, I developed my program, and the rest is history. So it's been going on for quite a long time now.
I think that's absolutely fantastic, and I'm sure that for so many families, you've changed the lives of how that family unit functions, how the mums function. Life changes when you have good sleep behaviour, and I think
Absolutely.
Bringing it back to that foundation of what are we doing with children and getting them to sleep better. And we have a childhood obesity prevention program for children and adolescents called Project Grit, which is one of my passions in this space. Having worked with adults for so many years, working with children is a big passion of mine. And I know that sleep deprivation or poor quality sleep leads to so many problems, such as weight-related issues. And I also think that for the mums that you're working with so frequently, often what happens is that they tend to put themselves last.
Yes.
They're working with children, they might have 1, 2 or 3 kids, wake up 10 years later and all of a sudden, oh my goodness, I've got 10 or 15 kilos to lose, but I haven't had that structure around how things function well in my family life. Do you think that's a big problem in terms of learning routine right from the beginning and coming back to that, and that we've become a little bit too, I guess, a bit complacent, that the anything for peace approach, let kids stay up until they can drop dead and fall asleep at night? What do you think?
I think that there's so many little points in there that, like, the first thing is that when mums will put everybody else before herself. We hear all the time, if you're on an aeroplane, put your mask on first before everybody else's. And that's just not a mum's prerogative. I make sure that everybody else is fed and watered and happy and content, emotionally, physically, everything, before I even dream of looking at what's going on for myself.
Yeah.
So when that happens, a mum, it's amazing how much a mum can put themselves through and still get through every day. And I say get through because some of those days we're not really enjoying, because we're just surviving, because we're trying to manage everybody else. And what is happening, or what I see so often, is obviously your body is just going into that fight and flight mode, and your sympathetic nervous system is in overdrive. And even if you try to lose weight when your body's like that, your body is not going to, because your body is in survival mode. So when you're not looking after yourself, then you're not going to be able to achieve anything in a weight loss area. But when we're looking after our children and we're suffering all the time through all of that, then it's very difficult to find the time to look after yourself. I definitely see mums trying so hard to find a good routine for their babies or for their children, trying so hard to establish positive bedtime routines and get that good sleep for their babies. But they're so confused about how they should do that, and they've lost their confidence in how to parent their children because of information overwhelm, and because of everybody else's opinion, and they are losing trust in themselves to know what's right for their children as well, which is it's just heartbreaking for me to see. And one of the biggest things that I see through when I do consultations with my parents is that taking away the overwhelm and helping them to helping them know what to focus on for their children, rather than having all of the information at hand and picking little bits from this and little bit from that, a little bit from this. When we do our consultation, we look at what's going on in that family. We're able to just hone in on exactly what's working, what's not working, and by giving that parent that focus, then they've got the confidence. And when they've got the confidence, they do amazing things.
So powerful, and I really relate to that comment that you made about the information overwhelm. That's I think a state that we see so many families are in, and it's very difficult to unravel, how to sort of navigate their way through life. Forget that they've just got a new baby and they've probably got a couple of other kids to deal with as well, but that becomes a really confusing situation. Are you looking after children as they get older? Once they've passed the babies, are you also helping older children as well with families that are having problems? And give me a couple of examples of families where you've seen some really good outcomes that you've worked with.
Wow, there's so many. I do work with children. So the majority of the kids that I work with are obviously up to about 2 years of age. Then we've got the 2-year-olds to say 4, where they play musical beds at night time. And usually by school age, most of the kids are on a good routine and they've really settled down, and usually at that stage then their overnight sleep cycles have started to deepen and they start sleeping better through the night, or what works for that family. I am currently working with a 6-year-old. 9-year-old. I'm currently working with a 9-year-old. So I do work with school age kids, but they are definitely fewer and further between. Sure. Some of my most memorable, I have got so many amazing stories about babies. I think, like you said, one of the biggest things that I love about what I do is the impact that it has on parents and families long term. I will have parents message me 5 years later and say, you do not understand how much of an impact you had on our family and how highly we praise you in our family, which is just lovely to think that years on I'm still making a difference. Or they say, we used you 5 years ago and I've given the information to my sister-in-law and now she's doing really well, and I can't thank you enough for just that simple practical advice. But one of my most memorable ones was a baby that I worked with down in Canberra several years ago, and we had arranged the consultation over text message, and we had done it because mum couldn't talk to me because she was underneath her baby in the bedroom the whole time. So she couldn't find the time to get out of the room. And she had a lot of food allergies, and so had her son, and her son had also got really severe reflux. So when I arrived at the home, I'd never met this woman, and I was about to spend 3 days with her husband and her son. And that first settle and that first 12 hours were just heartbreaking because of how physically exhausted she was. She had lost so much weight because what she couldn't eat with her food intolerances, and then what she couldn't eat because of her son. And then she was breastfeeding all the time. So her diet consisted of tuna, brown rice, and apples, and had been that way for about 6 months. And then within 24 hours, the first day and that first settle, we're teaching her son how to settle. We were there with him the whole time, and I was leaning over and comforting him in the cot to try and help him fall asleep in the cot. And I could hear his reflux, obviously. And it was that we had to help him learn to sleep supported But as he was getting upset, he was refluxing. And it was the point of, it's the chicken or the egg. We had to fix the sleep so that we could regulate, if he was getting better sleep, that was going to regulate his food intake, his digestive system, which was going to improve the reflux. But while we were fixing the sleep, he was feeling a little bit yuckier from the reflux. He made such a huge turnaround within 24 hours that on the third day we were just celebrating, and mum and dad, just how relieved they were to have mum out of the bedroom and being able to sit down and have a meal with her husband without having to sit in the dark eating rice and tuna while her son was attached to her. So, and there's many stories. I've got so many stories like that, and that's why I'm so passionate about helping parents to understand that early childhood sleep foundations are really important, and how we teach them how to sleep is the way they're going to learn long term.
I think that's absolutely phenomenal. What a beautiful story, and what an incredible impact that you've had on that family. And I think it's so interesting, the connection from sleep to digestive issues, dietary implications, and what impact does that have on behaviour, on how you feel, on your mood, and how everything kind of connects throughout the day, and it has this flow-on effect, doesn't it, right? Absolutely. Throughout the day. And this is something that I think is so important, to come back to the basics, the foundations, and looking at, well, we need to develop good sleep patterns and behaviour patterns for children right from the outset, and hopefully by doing that we're setting them up for success ongoing. One of the things that you mentioned there was the routine of musical beds.
Yeah.
And I think that for some parents is a huge challenge, and I see it also in people I know. You're looking after a 9-year-old at the moment, but I see that also in children. It seems to be getting a little bit older and older in terms of management of that situation. How damaging do you think that can be when you've got this musical bed routine, and you've got mum and dad swapping beds, and the children swapping beds, and there's this whole kind of charade going on right throughout the night? And how do you break that habit? How do you get the child to sleep in its own room when it's had this ongoing routine for such a long time?
First, if it's not a problem, it's not a problem. So I often say, for anybody, if you are really happy with you're playing that musical beds, that's absolutely fine, okay? And I'm not here to tell you what to do. But if it's not okay for your marriage, for your relationship, for your child, well then doing something about it, and actually making conscious steps to do something about it. One story that I will share is that I was working with a client whose husband was a musician and did a lot of travel through Europe, and they had a daughter who, while she was young, they traveled a lot with her, with the band, and she had always co-slept with them, and that was fine. And then as she got older, it continued. And when she was 14, her mum and dad decided that they were going to have another baby. I guess she was 14 when they had the second baby. And they had kind of gotten to the point where mum was like, I am not making the same mistake with my new baby. So I'd come to do an overnight consultation with mum, and during that consultation we had to get Nan to come and sleep with the 14-year-old, because the 14-year-old had never slept by herself, and her anxiety levels were so high that she couldn't physically sleep by herself without having huge anxiety. So while mum was trying, so usually mum, daughter and baby were in the bed together, but because we were working on the baby, she'd got Nan to come in and help. And dad had kind of said, well, I don't want to be sleeping with my daughter at this age because that's just weird. So we have to do something about this. But that night when we got up to look after the baby, Nan had heard us and she'd snuck out to come and say hi. And within 5 minutes of her coming out, the 14-year-old came screaming through the hallway anxious about where Nan was gone. This was at 2 o'clock in the morning. So this 14-year-old had sensed that Nan was gone and had gotten anxious. But that's obviously not in my realm of dealing with. But what I saw there was this poor girl who had no self-regulation skills, and she needed to have that attachment with somebody else because she didn't know how to manage her own emotions. So I definitely, and that's an extreme case. I don't think I've seen anyone like that before, but those sorts of things can happen, and learning how to self-regulate is an important skill. It's not something that you have to absolutely have when you're a newborn, but we build our foundations for everything that we learn in the rest of our life within the first 2 years of our life, and then we build on top of that. And if we can get the foundations right, then everything else is easy. If you ask a builder, what happens if you don't get your foundations right? Well, then there's going to be something that's impacted later on.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that anxiety is a big issue, and not allowing the child to develop, resilience, self-confidence and independence.
Self-regulation.
Yeah, or everything that relates to that self-regulation can become a problem. So totally respect and understand that setting the foundation early is so important, and I hope that our conversation today is going to help lots of other people think about how they can actually establish that. Something else that I see in children, and especially in the children that we've been treating and helping manage through our Project Grit, is that device technology is a big issue, and that sending a child to bed on an iPad or with a phone, the blue light and all those problems. And I think, I know it's a problem for adults as well who have those concerns, but with children, it's that allowing that, exposure to too much time on devices can also be very negative in terms of impact on sleep behaviours.
Absolutely. Look, I think anyone, you just need to watch The Social Dilemma to realise the impact that everything, like the devices, are having on our kids. And I've got an 11-year-old, and I know that everybody with children it's a constant battle of controlling how much they're exposed to. And you've got to, I'm not going to say that I do not recommend devices. I don't recommend TV before 2 years of age. If for me, when my daughter was little, I think from about 15 months plus, maybe a little bit younger, I let her watch Wiggles and Play School, and they were the only things that I would let her watch up until she was about 3. And the main reason I allowed that was because they're real people doing rhyme and repetition and dancing and make-believe. And then slowly we'd add different things on. I know that it's hard. It is so hard, especially if we've got dads who are running late, dads who are driving down that highway from Brisbane, and mum's got her 3-year-old and her new baby and her baby, and she's trying to get them to sleep, or she's trying to manage them at bedtime routine by herself. And she'll give her toddler the tablet to watch something while feeding her baby. And hey, look, if that works, that's fine, because if she's able to give her toddler that time to sit in his bed or sit on her bed and watch an episode of Paw Patrol while mum can feed baby and then put baby down and then close the iPad and take her toddler into his room and read a couple of stories, spend some time connecting, and then get them down, fantastic. Devices are always an issue. They're always an issue, and the less that we've got them, the better.
So for me, in our patient population, we're dealing with adult obesity, overweight and obesity issues, and one of the big things for me that we see in our patients every single day are concerns around sleep. And what that looks like is often sleep apnea, which can be a silent deadly disease. It can lead to multiple other comorbidities such as type 2 diabetes, stroke, heart attack. As you would be aware from your nursing background, that sleep apnea is a dangerous disease. And I just think that if we come back to the basics and the foundations, that maybe we'd be avoiding some of these problems later on in life.
Yeah.
addressing the sleep issues. The other thing that I see in an adult population is what happens when people are not sleeping well. Whether it's mild sleep apnea or just not getting good quality sleep, when there's stress involved. And I mentioned earlier the sleep, stress, sugar. I think the 3 S's often do
go together.
They go together.
And there should be a C in there for caffeine too.
I'm not giving that up. Can't live without my coffee. But I think it really is important to kind of stress how that impacts someone's life as they grow through adulthood. And for me, what I see often in that cycle of behaviour with sleep apnea is that you poor quality sleep, low daytime energy, reach for the next quick fix to get you through that day. And that cycle of behaviour is so hard to break. And then conversely, what we see is once patients start to regain their health and well-being and through weight loss, sleep is all of a sudden better and life moves forward better.
Sleep is always going to be better with sleep apnea when you lose weight. Obviously,
100%.
that's all. It's one of the biggest key factors for sleep apnea. For, like we touched on earlier, I don't think there's any way that you can possibly lose any weight if you're tired, if you're stressed, and you're exhausted. What ends up happening is that you will go on a weight loss program, you'll try and eat healthy. You'll feel depleted because you're tired and you're not getting the sugar fixes that you were getting, and you're also not seeing the results on the scales, which is demoralizing. And you just go, oh, it's just too hard. So I'll just keep doing what I was doing because I can't get out of that cycle, and I'm tired, so there's nothing I can do about it because I have this situation at home. So I know that for me, I'm very lucky. I've never struggled with my weight, but in my job, I've had a lot of health issues because of the work that I do. For example, that client that I spoke about in Canberra, my daughter was about 3 years old at the time. So I was a very busy young mum running my own business, have a baby at home. I was working night shifts every night, but looking after my daughter. And I thought, I've got the best of both worlds because, my baby's sleeping while I'm working, and I'm looking after my child when I'm not. And I'd also have her at daycare 2 days a week. But slowly, my health was suffering. And I thought that I would, as many mums do, it's like, oh, whatever, I'll just have a nervous breakdown and then, I'll sort it out then.
Wow.
Do that. But when I was in Canberra, I lost my hearing. I went completely deaf in my right ear. Just dropped out like that, and I didn't know what happened, so I had to go to the hospital. And it happened 4 more times over the next 6 months where I'd completely lose my hearing for hours, and I literally was just given steroids to go home and fix it. I also found that I was having trouble seeing around bends when I was driving. That everything would just go blurry and foggy on me. Didn't put these two things together. And it wasn't until one night when I was sitting there with my husband and I burnt my arm, but I hadn't known I'd burnt it. So I had a big burn mark across my arm and I hadn't seen it. And my husband looked at me and said, what happened to your arm? And I went, I don't know. And I could pinch my skin and I could feel it, but I didn't feel the burn. And we all know what even a tiny burn feels like. So automatically I went to the doctor. Anyway, long story short was they thought that I had MS. And after doing some tests, they realized that I was just so tired and exhausted that my body was slowly shutting down. And I was showing symptoms of MS because I was so tired. And being a mum, it was, my husband's got Crohn's disease, so we were thinking 2 parents with autoimmune conditions, then we have to do something about this. So I took some time off and I worked very hard over that next year to slow down. Anytime I got symptoms after that, I would scratch. So this is how, there were triggers for me that I knew that when I was getting overtired that I would scratch my arms and it would just be an uncontrollable scratch, and then I would take some time off, but it still stupidly, we're still as mums battling. And it wasn't really until COVID hit that I really changed everything about how I function and actually prioritize myself. For the first time in my life, I'd actually put some priority onto me and my health. And that's silly, because this was 7 years later that after I'd first been diagnosed or suspected of having MS. It still took me 7 years to put myself first. And it's a really hard thing. Mums really, we just put everyone else before ourselves.
What an incredible lesson. It's kind of the ultimate dichotomy, that the sleep consultant is the one who's the most sleep deprived and exhausted, and then sees the impact of what that looks like. You must have learned so much from all of that. And I also agree that the whole big COVID situation, the state that so many people were in, has led a lot of people to actually really value more and more their health and well-being, and understand that they need
Absolutely.
to prioritise yourself, and there's a lot of need for self-love and self-care, and managing your own well-being is even more and more critical now. You must have learned a lot from that personal experience that you now take back into your professional world and how you function. What do you think was the biggest lesson for you that you actually are able to teach mums now?
There's so many little lessons that, do you know what? All these lessons I was still teaching mums. I just wasn't listening to them. I wasn't listening to what I was teaching my mums about. Eat well, look after your own health, when your baby sleeps. I don't tell mums to sleep when baby sleeps, because let's be honest about it, that doesn't happen. But if your time is just going, when they're asleep, I'm going to lie on the sofa for half an hour, or I'm going to take that time to have a cup of tea and scroll through my Instagram, if that's your self-care. Hiding in the toilet for 5 minutes is not self-care. That's a cry for help. And any mum that sees like hiding away from the children for 5 minutes, because you see these Instagram posts that say, mum self-care is 5 minutes on the toilet or a shower alone in peace. That's not self-care. That should be a God-given right or a human right. It's trying to give yourself proper self-care, and that is, this last year I've really prioritized giving myself a break and realizing that my family have to come first, my health has to come first. And amazingly, the things like changing the way I exercise, and the fact that now that I'm not pounding pavements running or doing HIIT workouts or anything like that, my weight hasn't suffered at all from it. If anything, it's so much more stable, and not having to get those sugar fixes, or feeling like you've hit 3 o'clock in the afternoon and just want to binge eat or just want to reach for the glass of wine. I definitely feel that even though I'm doing so much less physically, my weight is so much better. I think I waffled a bit there.
I think it's all about how you self-manage and reading those cues, and maybe you were adrenally fatigued, that you needed to change that yin-yang kind of combination of what was right for your body at the time. And incidental movement, we know, is so important as well. Moving your body every day is important, but maybe it was, for you, time for a bit of a change of direction in how you approach that.
I think I read Dr. Libby Weaver's book, The Rushing Women Syndrome, and I cried so much through it, because I was like, that's me, and really took on board the breathing. Stop and breathe, cut down the caffeine. Instead of doing a HIIT workout, do some yoga. If your body is already stressed, then putting more stress on it by doing a HIIT workout is not going to do you any favors. And I've seen that in my own body, and I've seen that in my own in my own headspace how I'm feeling because of it. And one of the biggest things coming through is, if I show you here, can you see all of this new hair growth? Mm-hmm. That's all from coming out of that adrenal fatigue and stress and having full night sleep consistently. That's one physical thing that I can look in the mirror every day and I see all this hair coming through and I can go, what you're doing, you're on the right track.
Oh, I love that, and our patients are going to love that, because often what happens for bariatric patients undergoing surgery is in the early stages of significant and rapid weight loss, they might have some hair loss, and it's a big issue for them. And we know it's going to grow back, but it's a big problem. And one of those things is managing all of those aspects of lifestyle around that to achieve that regrowth.
Yeah.
As an adult, you've got great techniques in teaching mums how to get their babies to sleep well. What tips do you have in place for getting a better night's sleep or better quality sleep as an adult? Do you use, for me, I use things like Calm as an app on my phone, or I might use, I think breath work's so powerful, and we learn more and more about, how to breathe better and what kind of breath work techniques we can use for relaxation, for de-stressing, and probably for sleep. What are some of your top tips?
It's funny because I did a podcast recently with Ramita, who Elevate, and she works with teenagers, and we talked about how the similarities between babies and tweens and sleep hygiene, and it's exactly the same for adults too. It doesn't really change. What we need a good routine at bedtime, and you need to have that wind down. So as an adult, and for me, it's having some relaxing time once the kids are gone to bed, trying not to work in the evening, shutting down my phone for at least an hour before going to bed, going and having a shower. Sometimes I might have a shower in the afternoon, but I would usually go and have a shower before I'm going to bed, get my jammies on, moisturizer, and then jump into bed. And I've usually got a book or a podcast that I will listen to or read so that I can actually get my head out of everyday life. Because if you're finding it difficult to shut down, just putting your brain into fantasy or fiction or something else is going to allow you some time to just get away from that. And if I'm listening to a story or a podcast, it's good to just lie there, listen, focus on what I'm listening to. And I'll usually do it for about 10 or 15 minutes and then I'll turn it off. And if I'm having difficulty sleeping from there, I breathe. And I think adults do struggle to, and I know that it took a lot of practice for me to learn how to just take some long, deep breaths.
Absolutely.
And even when I'm telling parents settling their babies, if they're feeling stressed, I want you to just stop and concentrate on 5 deep breaths. Do 5 deep breaths and then have a break from the concentration of that, because it can be a bit hard, and then do it again. And I take that on when I'm going to bed. So the basic principles of good sleep hygiene, regardless of whether or not you're 2 months, 2 years, or 40 years, you just need to have a nice routine that is geared towards relaxation and shutting your mind and your body down.
It sounds so simple but so valuable, and it really is a critical key in improving how we live, our quality of life, how you wake up in the morning, how you function every single day. Everything changes when you get a good night's sleep. It has been an absolute pleasure having you here today. I think there's so many takeaways.
Awesome, it's been lovely to be here.
Thank you so much. I asked one key question before you go. Elaine, what does wellness mean to you?
Looking after yourself and your family. Big thing is taking some time to prioritize your own health first.
Thank you so much. So many takeaways today, and I love the attitude of really prioritizing yourself. Self-care and your family, they're so critical, and thinking about sleep hygiene. I've learnt so much from listening to you today, and I can't stress enough the value of good quality sleep and a good night's sleep. Thank you.
Thank you. Awesome.
Thank you for joining the Wellness Warriors podcast. It's been a pleasure to have you online with us. If you enjoyed the series, please leave your review, subscribe and follow, and we look forward to sharing many more stories with you in the future.